They arrived in America convinced that the road trip was proof of everything wrong with the country. Too many highways, too many cars, too much distance between places that Americans casually described as close. A European fan could travel through several countries in the time an American needed to cross one state. Back home, they had trains, compact cities, walkable streets, and stadiums surrounded by cafes, apartments, and crowded public squares. In America, the map seemed almost hostile. One match was here, the next was hundreds of miles away. The hotel was far from the stadium. The restaurant was 20 minutes from the hotel. And the quick stop recommended by a local somehow required another 45 minutes of driving. Before the journey even began, the Europeans were laughing. They called American road trips exhausting, wasteful, unnecessary. They joked that Americans spent half their lives sitting behind a steering wheel and the other half searching for parking. Then they rented a car. At first, it felt like a mistake. The vehicle was larger than expected. The highway had more lanes than some of their hometown streets. The navigation system announced distances that sounded less like directions and more like warnings. The first city slowly disappeared behind them. The buildings became smaller. The traffic thinned. The road opened. And something changed. For the first time since arriving, there was no airport security, no crowded platform, no fixed departure time, and no timetable controlling the day. They could stop whenever they wanted, turn whenever they wanted, change the destination, follow a sign, take the longer route, leave early, leave late. Or keep driving simply because the sky ahead looked too beautiful to ignore. The same fans who mocked America's endless highways suddenly understood why Americans wrote songs about them. Because the road was not merely connecting one destination to another. The road had become the destination. And before the World Cup journey ended, many of them would remember the miles between the matches more clearly than the matches themselves. The first surprise was the scale. European geography often changes quickly. A train leaves a capital city, passes through suburbs, reaches farmland, and crosses into another region before the traveler has finished his coffee. America changed more slowly. The city stretched outward. Shopping centers appeared. Neighborhoods became smaller. Then the landscape expanded so widely that the passengers stopped speaking for a moment. The road continued toward a horizon that appeared unreachable. Fields opened on both sides. Clouds cast moving shadows across the ground. Trucks passed like moving buildings. The sky felt larger because almost nothing interrupted it. A supporter sitting in the passenger seat raised his phone to record the view. Another laughed. "What are you filming? It's only a road." But 20 minutes later, he was filming too. That was the first contradiction. The road looked empty, yet it did not feel empty. Yet it did not feel empty. It carried a strange promise. Something could appear around the next bend. A small town, a diner, a lake, a mountain, a roadside attraction nobody had planned to visit. A conversation with someone who had never attended a World Cup match, but wanted to know everything about the team printed on their shirts. European fans had expected the drive to be dead time. America turned it into discovery time. At the beginning, they tried to follow the schedule perfectly. Fuel stop at 11, lunch at 1, arrival before 4, no unnecessary delays. Then they saw the first giant roadside sign, fresh barbecue. Next exit, one supporter wanted to stop. Another argued that they were already behind schedule. The driver kept going. For the next 10 miles, everyone discussed the barbecue they had not eaten. Then another sign appeared. The car became quiet. At the next exit, they turned. That decision destroyed the schedule. It also created the first memory. The restaurant was not famous. It was not listed in their original travel plan. There were no tour buses outside. Just a modest building, several pickup trucks, the smell of smoke, and local customers who immediately noticed the foreign football shirts. A man at the counter asked where they were from. Within minutes, the entire room knew. Someone asked which team they supported. Someone else recommended another restaurant 2 towns ahead. An older customer warned them not to trust the neighboring state's version of barbecue. The fans had entered for food. They left with directions, jokes, photographs, and enough recommendations to completely ruin every remaining plan. This was the America hidden between the famous cities. Not the America of global headlines. Not the America of tourist landmarks. The America of local pride. Every town had something it believed visitors needed to experience. A sandwich, a pie, a lake, a historic street, a strange museum, a view from a hill, a gas station that somehow required 40 minutes to explore. The Europeans began noticing that Americans often spoke about distance emotionally rather than mathematically. Not far could mean 30 minutes. Just down the road could mean an entire podcast episode. Nearby depended entirely on how much fuel remained. At first, this was frustrating. Then it became funny. Soon they were using the same language. One fan asked how far the next stop was. The driver shrugged. Not too far. It was 90 miles away. America had changed him. The second surprise was the freedom of the stop. On a train, the scenery passes beautifully, but it belongs to the window. The traveler cannot suddenly ask the driver to stop because a town looks interesting. The road trip offered a different relationship with geography. The passengers were not only observing America, they were choosing how to enter it. A sign pointed toward a scenic route. They followed it. A local recommended a lake. They changed direction. A storm appeared ahead. They stopped for coffee and watched it move across the horizon. A supporter saw an enormous American flag near a roadside business and asked for a photograph. The others laughed at him. 5 minutes later, everyone was standing beneath it. Their travel plan had been built around stadiums. Their memories were being built around interruptions. This is the secret of a great road trip. The mistake becomes the story. The wrong exit leads to the best diner. The delayed arrival creates the sunset. The strange stop produces the conversation everyone repeats later. Efficiency gets the traveler to the destination. Inefficiency sometimes gives the journey meaning. The Europeans had arrived believing travel should be organized. America taught them that movement could also be improvised. This did not mean the highway system was perfect. The criticism remained valid. Many American communities were difficult to explore without a car. Distances could isolate people. Fuel costs added pressure. Long drives became exhausting. Traffic near major cities could destroy the feeling of freedom in minutes. A road that looked romantic at sunrise could feel endless after 8 hours. And the driver did not have the luxury of staring peacefully at the landscape. While everyone else filmed mountains and clouds, he was watching lane markings, mirrors, exits, and trucks. The road trip divided the group into 2 social classes: passengers who called the journey beautiful, and the driver who needed coffee. Still, even the exhaustion became part of the shared experience. They created playlists. Each person selected songs from home. Football chants became road trip anthems. Old American songs suddenly sounded different when played beneath an open sky. A track they had heard hundreds of times became attached to one exact stretch of road. Years later, hearing that song would bring the landscape back. The heat, the sunlight, the laughter from the back seat, the bag of snacks nobody admitted buying, the repeated argument over whether they had missed the exit. The road became a container for memory. Football had given them a reason to travel together. The car forced them to become a temporary family. They learned who complained first, who fell asleep immediately, who could not read the map, who bought too much food, who insisted on stopping for every photograph, who controlled the music as if the vehicle were a private radio station, who said, "We are almost there," while knowing they were nowhere near the destination. A train allows people to spread out. A car makes every personality unavoidable. That closeness produced arguments. It also created intimacy. Between cities, the fans talked about more than football: families, work, relationships, plans they had never admitted aloud. The tournament was supposed to create sporting memories. The road created personal ones. Then came the roadside stores. The first large travel center left them speechless. Fuel pumps stretched across the property. Inside were snacks, drinks, hot meals, coffee, clothing, souvenirs, household objects, travel equipment, and enough choices to make a simple stop feel like an expedition. The Europeans had mocked American convenience before. Now convenience was supporting the entire journey. A phone charger had been forgotten. The store had one. Someone needed pain medicine. Available. The group needed food. Multiple counters. A supporter wanted a ridiculous souvenir. There were hundreds. The stop solved problems nobody had predicted when the day began. They entered planning to spend 10 minutes. They left nearly an hour later. The road trip was teaching them a dangerous lesson. In America, the place that looks unnecessary may become the place you discuss for the rest of the trip. Soon they were ranking rest stops. Cleanest restroom. Best coffee. Largest snack selection. Strangest souvenir. Most impressive number of fuel pumps. The same people who once believed travel stops should be quick had become critics of roadside infrastructure. They were not only driving across America, they were reviewing it. And behind the humor was a deeper realization. America's road culture existed because distance shaped daily life. When towns and cities were separated by long stretches of highway, the stop needed to provide more. Fuel alone was not enough. Travelers needed food, restrooms, supplies, safety, and sometimes a place to recover emotionally after several hours in the vehicle. The giant roadside store no longer looked like random excess. It looked like an answer to the scale of the country. Large distances created large solutions. That pattern appeared everywhere. Large highways, large vehicles, large drinks, large fuel stations. The visitors could still question the environmental cost, but they understood the logic. America's size was not a visual detail. It shaped behavior. The third surprise was how often the landscape changed. Visitors who knew America primarily through films often imagined separate categories: the city, the desert, the mountains, the farmland, the coast. During a road trip, those categories began connecting. One morning started beneath a city skyline. By afternoon, the group was surrounded by open country. Another journey passed through forests, industrial towns, farms, suburbs, and small communities whose architecture changed gradually. The country did not feel like one place. It felt like several countries sharing a flag and a highway system. Local accents changed. Food changed. Weather changed. Architecture changed. Political signs changed. The rhythm of conversation changed. In one region, strangers spoke immediately. In another, people seemed more reserved. One town displayed football flags from around the world. Another appeared almost untouched by the tournament, until residents noticed the visitors' shirts and began asking questions. The fans had assumed that traveling between host cities would mean leaving the World Cup behind. Instead, the tournament followed them in unexpected ways. A waiter asked for a match prediction. A cashier wore another country's jersey. A family at a fuel stop wanted a photograph with the visiting supporters. A child recognized a famous player printed on a shirt. Football entered places far from the stadium, and the Europeans discovered that America's relationship with the sport was more complicated than they had assumed. Not everyone followed it. Not everyone understood every rule. But curiosity often filled the gap. Americans asked questions without embarrassment. Why do supporters sing for the entire match? How is the tournament organized? Why does a draw matter? Which rivalry is the most intense? The Europeans had expected ignorance to feel insulting. Instead, genuine curiosity sometimes felt flattering. They became temporary ambassadors for their sport. The road trip gave them audiences that the stadium never could. Inside the stadium, everyone already cared. At the roadside diner, they could introduce the game to someone new. But the journey's emotional turning point came one evening, when the group was running late. The original plan had failed completely. A wrong turn had cost time. Traffic had slowed them. Everyone was tired. The next city was still far away. The driver wanted silence. The passengers had stopped joking. Then the highway turned west. The sun was beginning to disappear. The sky became orange, red, and purple. The landscape opened on both sides. For several miles, almost no buildings interrupted the view. Someone lowered the music. Another supporter raised his phone, then slowly put it down. The camera could not capture the feeling. They had spent the day trying to arrive. Now, for the first time, nobody wanted the road to end. This was the moment the entire journey changed. The highway was no longer the obstacle between matches. It was the place where they finally understood the country. America's distances could be frustrating because they separated people. But those distances also created space. Space to think, space to breathe, space for landscapes that did not fit inside a city, space for a group of exhausted fans to become silent together, because the view was enough. Back home, travel often meant efficiency. Here, travel had become emotional. The open road offered something difficult to measure: possibility, the feeling that another version of life might exist beyond the horizon. That idea has always shaped America's mythology. Movement, reinvention, leaving one place and becoming someone else in another. The road carried practical traffic, but it also carried imagination. The European visitors had mocked Americans for romanticizing driving. Now they were beginning to understand the romance. It was not about the steering wheel. It was about permission. Keep going. Turn somewhere new. Leave the schedule. Follow curiosity. The road did not promise that something better was ahead. It simply allowed the traveler to search. That freedom came with real costs. Not everyone could afford it. Not everyone could drive. Many communities had been designed in ways that made cars mandatory rather than optional. The same highway representing freedom to tourists could represent daily financial pressure to residents. Fuel, insurance, repairs, long commutes, traffic, isolation. A responsible documentary cannot transform American car dependence into pure poetry. For many people, the open road is not a vacation. It is the unavoidable route to work. The visitors experienced the highway as an adventure because they could eventually leave it. Residents often could not. That distinction mattered. Yet criticism of the system did not erase the beauty of the experience. Two truths could exist together. America needed stronger public transportation and more walkable communities. And the American road trip remained one of the most powerful ways to experience the country's geography and regional diversity. The Europeans did not need to choose between admiration and criticism. Travel had made them capable of holding both. By the final stage of the journey, their behavior had completely reversed. At first, they wanted the shortest route. Now they selected the scenic one. At first, every stop felt like wasted time. Now they searched for strange places to visit. At first, they complained when the destination was 5 hours away. Now someone said, "Only 5 hours?" They had adapted to American distance. A 2-hour drive had become small. A 3-hour drive had become manageable. A 6-hour drive required snacks, fuel, music, and psychological preparation, but no longer disbelief. The country had changed their internal map. The final city appeared in the distance. Buildings returned. Traffic increased. Navigation instructions became more frequent. The open landscape disappeared behind concrete and lights. The supporters should have felt relieved. The long drive was ending. The hotel was close. The match was approaching. Instead, the vehicle became unusually quiet. Everyone understood that the road trip part of the journey was nearly over. The stadium would be exciting. The city would be memorable. But those experiences had been expected. The road had surprised them. It had turned unfamiliar diners into stories, wrong exits into jokes, strangers into temporary friends, songs into memories, distance into freedom. The Europeans had come to America believing the miles between cities were an unfortunate design flaw. Now those miles contained the heart of the trip. The next day, while discussing their favorite moments, someone mentioned a goal. Someone else mentioned the stadium atmosphere. Then one supporter said it had been the sunset on the highway. Another chose the roadside barbecue. Another remembered the small town where strangers asked about their team. Someone mentioned the playlist. Someone else remembered laughing at the giant travel stop. None of those moments had appeared on the tournament schedule. That was exactly why they mattered. The official journey belonged to the World Cup. The unofficial journey belonged to them. America had not convinced the fans through a tourism advertisement. It had placed them on a road and allowed the country to reveal itself slowly. Not every mile was beautiful. Some were boring. Some were stressful. Some felt endless. But together, they created something no flight could provide. Context. The visitors saw what existed between the famous places. They understood that New York was not America. Texas was not America. California was not America. The small town was not America. The small town was not America. The highway was not America. But traveling between them revealed why no single image could contain the country. From a distance, America appeared simple. Up close, it changed every few hours. That complexity destroyed the stereotype. The European fans had mocked the road trip because they believed only the destination mattered. The journey taught them that destinations explain where a country wants visitors to look. The road reveals what exists when nobody is performing. A modest town, a tired worker, a local restaurant, a family traveling home, a field beneath an enormous sky, a stranger holding the door and asking where you came from. The road showed them ordinary America, and ordinary America became their favorite memory. They returned home still appreciating trains, still valuing compact cities, still questioning car dependence, still believing that Americans sometimes drove distances Europeans would consider absurd. But they also returned with something they had not expected, a desire to go back, not merely to another stadium, to the highway, to another diner, another state, another sunset, another road with no famous landmark at the end. The mockery disappeared because they had discovered the emotional logic behind the American road trip. It was never only about getting somewhere. It was about what could happen before you arrived. The road gave them control over time, the freedom to stop, the freedom to continue, the freedom to change the story. And once the journey became theirs, they no longer wanted it to end. Which part of an American road trip would you enjoy most? The open highway, the roadside food, the giant travel stops, the changing landscapes, or the unexpected conversations in small towns? Share your answer in the comments. Like this video if it changed how you see America's long-distance travel culture, and send it to someone who believes road trips are only wasted time between destinations. Subscribe to Modern World Insights, because in the next documentary, we will reveal the American small-town welcome European visitors never expected, and why saying goodbye became the hardest part of their journey. This documentary presents cultural commentary inspired by common international travel experiences. Individual journeys, road conditions, distances, and reactions vary across the United States.